Hello and welcome to the i3 lecture series hosted by the Masters in Digital Photography here at the School of Visual Arts. I am Julie Graham. Our guest tonight is my fellow country person, Owen Davies. We met here at an i3 lecture last year where we quickly bonded over a packet of Maltesers, which is basically malt balls to you Americans, only far, far superior.
Way better.
I followed Owen on Instagram and I was intrigued by his ethereal, mysterious photographs of buildings. Since then, I have learned about his past experiences in and out of photography, and I am pleased to welcome him tonight. Owen's work has been seen online and on walls, not least of all at London's fabulous Royal Albert Hall. He's been commissioned by the New York Times, Grand Designs magazine, Esquire, and Harper's Bazaar Online. Owen was a Clump Ching Fresh finalist this year, as well as being named one of Photolucida's Critical Mass Top 50. He's also a creative consultant, and I'd like to note he has my ideal About page on his website. Nice clean headshot, so you can recognize him if you run into him down the pub, and a phone number in case you urgently need to call him about a job. Welcome.
Thank you, Julie. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Owen, and I'm from the southeast of England, just between London and Cambridge. Pretty boring suburban town, so it's great to be in such a great city like New York City. And I'm going to be showing quite a lot of my architectural work, but also I wanted to go a bit further back to how I got started. So that started in still life work. I came to photography pretty late. It was my mid-20s by the time I kind of seriously picked up a camera. Before that, my creative outlet was music. I had a typical teenage angsty band kind of thing going on until I was probably about 21, and then I started making music in my bedroom, and all of these dreams of being a musician didn't pan out. And I'd spent about 10 years in pretty dead-end retail jobs. Just kicking around, earning not great money and not really doing too much with my time. And I saved up some money and went traveling to the west coast of the US. And I took a little small compact camera with a few manual controls on it. And I just kind of fell in love with making images of the landscapes there. I mean, if anybody's been out to California, it's beautiful. It was hard to take a bad photo, but I very much did take a few bad photos at that time. So fast forward after that trip, I get back and I'm wanting to take more photos back home. So I kind of get a bit more serious about my equipment, upgrade to like a system camera, and just carry on working the dead-end jobs and photographing things in my spare time. I was saving some money up to go traveling at this point. I was wanting to do something in my mid-20s, and then I had a friend whose father worked at Calumet store in London, a big photography store, and they were running a course from the store in commercial photography. And he suggested I go and interview for the course and give it a go, and you know, I'd really enjoyed my photography at that time, so I thought, step it up, take it a bit more seriously. Applied for the course and got in. So it was a 2-year course focusing on commercial photography, so it was teaching us studio lighting, techniques, and basically, and the main important thing here is how to get paid making photography. So it was invaluable, really, really great place to be and to learn from some great professionals. And during that time, I applied for an assistant photographer job at a company called Zoops, who are a luxury goods reseller in my hometown, actually. And they gave me the job even after I broke an antique during my test shoot interview. I had a tripod set up. It was on a squishy carpet in this room, and I took the camera off the tripod, turned around, and it smashed this plate to bits. And I swore very loudly. Still managed to get the job. So thank you very much, Joe, for that. And in that time, I was there for 7 years. And by the time I left, I was creative director at the company. So most of my work typically involved photographing a lot of watches, luxury watches. It's very technical work, lots of painstaking hours in dark studios, moving lights, playing with reflections, trying to control reflections where you don't need them. For instance, this highlight on the dome at the top of that watch took me about 2-ish hours to get in the right place, and then I still needed to retouch all of the dust away from it as well. So very methodical, technical work, and added that the value of the items that I was shooting was kind of nerve-wracking as well. This watch is worth around $100,000, so very much a don't drop it kind of situation. So some other work that I was doing for Zoops at the time, a lot of still life. This watch was the most expensive one we sold, so upping the ante a little bit. This was actually sold for €1 million. Yeah, it was I got to try it on, which was kind of cool, right? So, and then making as many beautiful images out of the small amount of props that we had. We had pretty small budgets. We were a startup company at the time, so I had to be pretty creative with set designs, which I was doing myself. I had no stylists or art directors. I was learning on the job and doing all of this at the time. We also sold handbags too, so a lot of playing around with light and shadow to get some interest in the scene. We also did some location work. Again, budgets were quite tight, so we called in a lot of favors. The model in this image here, or both the images here, was a friend of our marketing assistant, and the Ferrari came from her parents weirdly owned an airfield, and on the airfield was a luxury car garage. So we pulled in a favor. They lent us the Ferrari for a couple hours, and we got to make some cool images. So very much teaching me how to kind of think on my feet and develop quick solutions to make the images work. Cars and watches very much go together. And being quite small objects, it was quite easy to recreate certain environments. This particular watch company wanted us to make an image for their timepiece that was made for explorers and mountaineers. So this is actually just taken just outside our headquarters on a typically grey British day. Any fellow Brits will know exactly the kind of day I'm talking about, which is about 360 of them. Just a low angle looking up at the sky, and the outfit really sells the shot, I think. So yeah, again, another example of thinking on your feet and getting the job done. This is probably the campaign I was most proud of in my time at Zoops. This was for our 2018 holiday campaign. The theme was around masterpieces, and I wanted to evoke the Dutch master still life paintings within the campaign itself and add a modern luxury twist. So these were all art directed, set designed, photographed by myself with help from a couple of the assistants on my team as well. At this stage I had a team of about 4 people that were full-time employees, so they're photographers and editors as well. So it was really a collaborative effort a lot of the time to get the work done, especially in the tight timeframes that we had, because we're also shooting the stock photography for the website to sell as well as the creative stuff. So trying to juggle both and timetable the studio was a challenge, but we made it work for the most part. These campaigns also went up on billboards. This is a 48 sheet one that we had at the local train station. A lot of traffic going in and out of London, so high traffic area was a good place to put it. And we also did some 6 sheets for the out of home campaign as well. And then finally, we did a couple of on-model shots as well to complement the still life campaign. These were mostly used for online, social media, and a few usages on the website as well. And we also have to be mindful of negative space around the subjects, so we can add copy and logos and things like that as well. During the same time while I was working at Zoops, I was also freelancing, photographing mostly live music events around London. I did quite a lot of work with a company called Lyrics Organics. They're a London-based creative agency, and they specialise in performing arts and youth activism. The founder, Dan, and I have been friends for a few years, and during the time when I was photographing gigs, we'd always talk about trying to make a project together where I could be a bit more creative outside of the restraints of the studio at work and do something with him and develop a project. So we came up with Object Create, which asked the question, if creativity was an object, what would it be? So through a series of portraits and still life images, we invited 12 performing artists that were linked with Lyrics Organics to reveal the stories behind their most precious objects that inspire them to do what they do. So what we did, I approached the project kind of from a still life kind of mind. So initially we would show the object. We'd ask the artist to write a few words about what they mean to them. And then we'd also shoot a portrait of them as well. So this one is Solomon Obi. He's a writer and spoken word artist. He had these notebooks since he was a young kid. He's just been writing in them all of his thoughts, his feelings, and then would turn that into poetry, which was really cool to see, especially the tatty one, the big A4 notebook. It was really interesting to see the variety of stories and objects that the artist brought to the project. I had some preconceptions about what I was going to see, and then was completely kind of thrown off by what was actually brought to me. So it was really great to see the variance in the objects and the reasoning behind why the artist had chosen them as well. Just as an aside, Toby's eyes are probably the bluest eyes I've ever seen in my life. They are even more incredible in real life than they are in that image. We also had some really touching stories. This chain belongs to Jack, and it was his late father's. So he wears it all the time when he's writing, performing, and it just gives him inspiration to do what he does. So it was really nice to have such personal stories involved in the project. And then to balance out the more serious ones, we had some slightly more humorous ones. This is Grace Savage's object, which is her dog lead. So she says there she gets most creative when she's doing something pretty mundane. So it was nice to have that kind of variance in the project too. So this was the first artistic project I've worked on, and it was very different. I'm used to having a task to do, being set by the boss. Like I have a certain amount of watches to photograph or a campaign to do. So to have no real direction beyond a collaborative effort with Dan was quite eye-opening for me, and I really enjoyed it. Dan had a lot of connections in London, and somehow he managed to get this exhibition, with this project, put together as an exhibition in the Royal Albert Hall in London, which is kind of similar to maybe Carnegie Hall or the Lincoln Center here. It's the premier classical music venue in the city, if not the country actually. So he manages to get us into this to Unstoppable Voices program that they had in January 2019. Budgets were small, so we did all the printing and framing at home. This is the prints on my dining table back in the UK. So that was a busy night with my wife Rowena and I getting all of these ready. So thank you very much for that help again. And then in January 2019, the Object Create show opened. It was in the Round in the Albert Hall. So just as you're about to enter in to go and take your seats for a concert. So it was a really big moment in my career to have to have a solo show, and B, to have it in such a prestigious venue, with a really high foot traffic rate as well. So hopefully a lot of people saw them and enjoyed the images as much as I enjoyed making them. So fast forward to 2020, and I moved here to New York City. My intention was to start freelancing again in photography. By the time I left Zoops in 2020, I was a creative director, and I really wasn't taking many images at that point. I was doing the art direction, the branding side of the business, so I really wanted to get back to making images. Unfortunately, COVID had different plans for me as I moved in March 2020 and had maybe 7 days before everything shut down. So my New York experience was pretty different to the vacation I'd had a couple of years before that. But what I was able to do, like a lot of people, I guess, is go for a walk during that time and just try and stay sane. So I had my camera with me. I needed to take pictures to kind of to keep my mind in a good space. So I go for a lot of walks with my camera, and I come across these really bizarre, to me, bizarre-looking buildings in unlikely locations. They kind of just loom out of nowhere when I come around a corner or walk into an open space, and they really just caught my eye. So I started making some images of them. This particular one is the bathhouse at Jacob Riis Beach down in the Rockaways. And it was actually selected for a group exhibition in Paris at Galerie Hugues in 2020, which was a few months after I made this image, and it was a really nice confidence boost to have somebody recognize it. It was also the first image in what would be light mass, but at that time I was just kind of experimenting and didn't really know the body of work at that time. So I started moving more around New York and trying to find more of these bizarre buildings. I did a lot of research on Google Maps. I was being drawn to concrete structures a lot, so I would just search brutalism, New York, modernism, concrete in New York, and see what I could find, and then go and take a look and make some images of them. A few of them I knew already where I wanted to go and photograph, like the State Pavilion here in Flushing Corona Park over in Queens. I'd seen in Men in Black. I don't know if anybody's seen it in that as well. So I knew in my head I wanted to go and see that and make an image. But others were more unexpected, like this Tribeca Synagogue downtown, just a beautiful structure. I'm very grateful for whoever drove their truck around the sand to give me some foreground interest there. So once the travel restrictions were starting to ease and I felt more comfortable moving outside of the city, taking trains and stuff, I decided to see if I can find some more of these strange buildings in other cities. So this was the Eric Linderman building. It's part of the government complex in Boston. Very cold day when I photographed this. It was, I don't know, about 20 degrees or something awful. So it was really interesting to go and find these, to me, alien buildings in other cities, not just in New York. And by this point, I'm starting to have an idea of a body of work in my head as well. I should also talk about technique when I'm making these images. The initial ones were shot with a tripod-mounted camera and a shift lens to preserve all the vertical lines. But during that COVID period, there were very few people on the streets. When everybody was coming back and everything was getting back to normal, it became harder to get that same feeling that I wanted in the images. So what I would then do would take multiple exposures and just use Photoshop to rub out basically any of the moving objects, and then any stationary ones like parked cars, I would remove manually in Photoshop with clone stamping. And I'm very thankful for the AI tools now that are coming into Photoshop, because they're saving me a lot of time to make these images. I also like to walk around my subjects. This is the same building as the previous slide. I usually have an idea for one image in my head, like a hero image, which is probably the art director in me, but I always find it a good exercise to walk around the building and take in some more angles and really get to know it a bit better. This is probably my favorite building in the entire series. This is the former Armstrong Rubber building in New Haven, Connecticut, and it was by the architect Marcel Breuer. This one, I was lucky enough to win the Global Cement and Concrete Association. Yep, that is a thing. I had no idea until they advertised the competition. They have a concrete and life photography competition, and thank God they do, because this one won the urban category, which I was very proud of. So it's got a special place in my heart, that image. This one's another good example of the technique that I was using in the later stages of the project. So this is the new museum downtown on the Lower East Side. I was set up with a tripod and a super wide shift lens to get the whole building in frame from across the street. As I'm sure many of you know, this street is pretty busy. So I was there for maybe 45 minutes, taking a whole bunch of exposures to make sure I had gaps basically in the traffic and the people crossing the street that I knew I could erase them later on in post. So it took a little while, bit of dedication when I'm on location, but I feel the results are worth it when I'm back in the studio. Oh, I got a drive-by from Joe Biden when I made this image. This is in Washington, DC. The whole motorcade came past. I'm not sure whether he thought I was waiting to take a photograph of him, but I was grateful for the fact there were no cars anywhere because the police came and cleared everyone out. I don't normally photograph residential buildings. I kind of find it a bit rude maybe for me to call a building where somebody lives alien or otherworldly. But this one in Coney Island, I couldn't resist it. It looks like somebody's taken a big bite out of the side of it. And then the interest with the school bus and the grass in front, I had to take a photo. So I made an exception for that particular one.
Your favorite building.
Yeah, that's a good one, right? I'd also revisit locations on occasion as well. I had a previous image of this structure, which is one of the rampways at Pier 88 on the West Side Highway. But it was shot on an overcast day, and again, the branding art director in me didn't like the clash between the blue skies, sunny days I had in the rest of the series. So I went back and on a better day and made some more images of it. I'm a big fan of parking lots. A lot of concrete, a lot of strange angles you can find on them. This particular one designed by the architect Paul Rudolph, who really knew how to make a street lamp. They're probably the most beautiful street lamps I've ever seen. I should also say the light quality is really what draws me to these images a lot. It's very different from the light in the UK. As I said, it's overcast most of the time there, so the light's much softer. We have brutalist buildings and concrete buildings in the UK, but the way the light plays with them, they feel way more drab and kind of dull to me. But here, they just really come alive. The concrete really just soaks in all of that sunlight, and you get some really interesting geometry from the shadows too. So Lightbass is still ongoing, but I feel like it's reaching a kind of natural conclusion. I've shot quite a few buildings, mostly on the East Coast now, and there's one still left in New York City, the Long Lines building down in Tribeca, which if anybody knows how I can get on a rooftop to get a good photograph of it, please come see me afterwards, because I've been trying and I can't find one. I feel like once I've done that, the series is complete, and I think I'm going to look into making a monograph of them, self-publishing in the next few months. So another shorter project that I've recently done this year, Adventures in Fiberglass, kind of came about by chance, really. It was made on a rainy day while I was on a trip down in Tennessee making work for another project, which I'll talk about later. And yeah, the weather had other plans for me, so I had nothing to do. So again, much like the COVID situation, I just kind of took off in my car with a camera and drove into a town called Pigeon Forge in Tennessee. I And immediately when I get there, I start noticing these pretty bizarre, interesting gift shops and roadside attractions, all along the same street, the main street going right through Pigeon Forge. So I did what I usually do in these situations. I grabbed my camera and just started making photos of them. And it turns out Pigeon Forge is home to Dollywood, and it's also very close to the Smoky Mountain National Park. So the population of the town is roughly 6,000, but they have between 11 and 14 million visitors every year due to the tourists. So there's a huge competition there to get tourist dollars in through the door of your business. So the business owners have gone to great lengths to make sure you pull off the highway and come and visit their attraction. And I just fell in love with them as soon as I saw them. Because of course you would have a museum to the Titanic about 400 miles away from the nearest ocean. It makes complete sense. Yeah, I really loved how wacky they were. Making this project felt quite freeing. I had no real expectations or a structure to follow beyond photographing what I found interesting and strange. I treated it kind of like an assignment that I'd set myself, basically. Go and find a story or something interesting in this town. You've got nothing else to do. They're also not my ideal weather conditions for shooting architecture, but I really think the overcast skies bring out the strangeness of the buildings a lot more. They act as more of a blank canvas. So in retrospect, I'm happy that the weather wasn't great, because I think it adds to the atmosphere of the body of work. I also started experimenting with pairs as well, something I didn't do in light mass. So that was interesting to try and find relationships between some of the images. I also felt a clarity in the direction of my work as a whole. I felt like I really kind of started to hone in on what I find interesting and how the built environment is both influenced by the people that make it, but also influences the people that interact with it as well. Just quite what was going through people's minds when they made these giant fiberglass animals for the front of their gift shops. I don't know, but I find it very interesting. Bonus points to anybody who can name the woman in the celebrity Mount Rushmore. We're pretty sure it's meant to be Marilyn Monroe. It doesn't bode well for a wax museum, I don't think, if you can't tell. But so that kind of concludes Adventures in Fiberglass, but it leads me quite nicely on to The Great Outsiders, which is my more traditional long-term documentary project that I've been working on. And it explores the forgotten mid-century architecture of the US National Park System. So in 2021, I was on vacation in the Smoky Mountains, and I come across this structure at the top of Clingman's Dome Mountain in the Smoky Mountains. Being America, you can drive up to the summit and then take a short walk, and then you come up to the trees, and there's this giant UFO-shaped building kind of snaking over the canopy for you to go up and get a better look at the mountain. I mean, being concrete and being kind of alien looking, I immediately had to photograph it. So I made a few images. I probably spent a bit too long on the top of the mountain. Sorry, Rowena, for taking a bit longer than usual. And when I got back home, I researched as to why that was there, and found out it was part of a government program called Mission 66, which between 1956 and 1966 invested $1 billion into the infrastructure of the US National Park System. Visitorship of the parks had dramatically increased after World War II, and the parks were really struggling to cope, and the environment was getting pretty damaged as a result of that. So infrastructure was improved in the ways of roads and other service buildings, but the main component of the program was the invention of the visitor center. Before the visitor center as a concept was invented, The parks had ranger stations where you could kind of grab a map maybe or get some kind of advice from the park rangers, but there were no central locations for anybody to go to. So a lot of people leaving cars on the roadside, again, further damaging the ecosystem there. So the parks really wanted to centralize everybody in one location and give them a way of orienting around the park. So they made over 100 in this 10-year period, so huge investment into the system. And they were all made in the modernist style, being the architectural style, or leading architectural style at the time. So while it was a practical success, and it did really help alleviate the stress on the parks from the visitors, a lot of people really don't like these buildings. Still to this day, they had a lot of opposition when they were first made, but especially now, people see them as out of place, ugly, and they would rather see the traditional log cabins that you would associate with the parks, which is known as parkitecture, which is a great little pun. So they've had opponents from the start, and many of the buildings are now kind of under threat from demolition or remodeling entirely. So my purpose of doing this work is to try and make a record of them before some of them either go or are demolished. But I also really just like how odd they are and how out of place they feel in the environment. Most of the buildings were designed by the parks themselves. They made two East and West Coast architecture offices, but some of them were made by notable architects. Painted Desert Visitor Center in Arizona. This is by Richard Neutra and Robert Alexander. This one is now in a historical register of preserved places, so it's not a threat of being demolished, but some of the other ones in that region are. So I've been researching and photographing a selection of the visitor centres that I feel make the best images that feel in tone with the Mission 66 project. And I've chosen ones that are in original or near original condition. I'm also really drawn to kind of humorous and banal scenes when I'm there. This particular scene is at Capulin Volcano National Monument in New Mexico. This is actually a night sky viewing area, but during the daytime, I just found it really funny because it looks like you just come park up and look at the mountain. So again, it taps into the kind of Disneyfication of the national parks that this program, I see the program as trying to do. They were trying to bring suburbia to the wilderness in a way and make palatable experiences for people who didn't want to camp or do anything too strenuous. They could just drive in, see some nature, grab a fridge magnet, and then and go home. So these kind of images really, to me, highlight the feeling that I'm getting when I'm visiting the sites and working on the project. Behind that wall is Lake Mead in Arizona. Has critically low water levels, and yet they still feel it's okay to have that lawn impeccably watered and pruned around the visitor center. But you've got to stay off the wall, so be careful. I'm also really drawn to just that conflict between a man-made structure and nature. This one particularly really feels like it's just pushed straight into the forest. Again, this is in the Smoky Mountains. They really love their concrete viewing towers there for some reason. So. I'm also keen to show them in their surroundings as well. So this is the Glen Canyon Visitor Center, perched over the Glen Canyon Dam, like some kind of Bond villain hideout. Just a very bizarre sight to see driving in. This is a photograph from the road bridge that goes over the river. And then a recent development that I've had with this project while working on it for a few years is I've started to collect some vintage postcards of the visitor centres that are no longer with us. They've been remodeled entirely or completely demolished. And I feel like it's a nice way of kind of preserving their memory as part of the project. I'm very glad that the Parks Department at the time decided they were that proud of these buildings that they would make a series of postcards of them. So I've been collecting those slowly over the past few weeks. This particular one is the Gettysburg Cyclorama at the Gettysburg National Park. This was made by Richard Neutra, and it was demolished in 2013. This is Paradise Visitor Centre at Rainier National Park, demolished in 2008. Around the time I actually would have been there on my initial trip, which is kind of heartbreaking. I didn't go and see it and make a photo. I've also found some postcards that have actually been written on and sent to a friend or a loved one. So again, it gives it a nice insight into how people viewed the parks at the time and how they were interacting with the spaces. Quite interesting that they chose the picture of the visitor centre over, a picture of a dinosaur skeleton. So this particular one at Dinosaur National Monument, the cyclorama at the front you can see there has been demolished. That was back in 2010. And then the visitor centre behind has been completely remodelled, but they've been pretty faithful to the original structure. And this one's a favourite of mine. I'm not quite sure what the art director was thinking with the school buses being an integral part of that image, but I kind of like it. So I've been working on this, as I said, since 2021. I have 28 locations to visit across 15 states. I've photographed 12 so far, covering about 4,000 miles in total. That's actually on the road, that's not including air miles from New York. Roughly 2,000 photos and videos taken as part of the process. I bet you're glad I'm not showing all of those today. Several questionable motels. And one rental car breakdown in the Utah desert, which was kind of terrifying in hindsight. I had a half bottle of water with me, and the car just did not move. Thankfully, somebody came past. I was about 10 miles away from any kind of civilization, and a guy was out making some drone footage, and he managed to tow me out of the ditch and got the car working again. So as a lesson to always carry water when you're in the desert. So yeah, my intention with the project is to make a book, and I'm self-funding all the location travel right now, so progress is slow. I've been applying for funds and grants, so I'm going to keep plugging away at that, and hopefully I can speed up, because the anniversary of the program is coming up in 2026, so it would be nice to have at least the production complete by then, and with a view to making an exhibition as well as the book to accompany it. But it's been a real joy to work on the project. I'm getting to see a lot of the country that I've not been to before, and just seeing these alien buildings in beautiful spaces is a real treat. And then lastly, I just wanted to share a quick body of work that came out of kind of pure happenstance. A few months ago, I was contacted by Eric, who's the owner of Geller House 2, which was designed by Marcel Breuer for the Geller family in 1969. It's located in Lawrence, New York, just on Long Island. He dropped me a DM and said he'd seen some of my work. I'm assuming some of the other Breuer photographs that I've made, and would I like to come and photograph his house? And Breuer is one of my favorite architects, so I literally jumped at the chance and said, yep, I can be there like next week. So he invited me over, and he opened the gate one afternoon in the summer and just said, take your time, explore the grounds, I've got things to do, just close the gate behind you. So I had a whole sunny August afternoon to walk around the grounds and explore this really incredible house. It was just a real joy to be able to walk around and take my time making some images. There was no commercial expectation from Eric at all. It was just a really kind gesture from him to invite me to come out and photograph the work. I took this as a good reminder to just shoot what interests you, and it sounds corny, but really just follow things you're passionate about. Had I not made those photos of some other Breuer architecture, maybe Eric wouldn't have seen them, he wouldn't have called me, I wouldn't have been able to photograph this house, which from my research, I don't think has been photographed since it was first built in 1969. So Ezra Stoller, a very famous architectural photographer, as far as I'm aware, was the last person to photograph that. So to be the second is really pretty cool. So for me, it's a reminder to just put yourself out there, shoot what you love, and you never know what kind of opportunities might come along. And that is me. So thank you very much. A huge thank you to Julie for booking me to speak. Thank God for Maltesers, eh? Tom and Marco and the rest of the team at SVA, thank you very much for having me. It's been a joy. And follow me on socials. And all of the descriptions of the buildings, locations for both Lightmass and Great Outsiders are on my website. And I also have prints available, so come see me. Thank you.
What a lovely presentation. I am wondering, have you ever thought of where are you going to go next with your mid-century series? Have you thought about non-government commission park buildings like Niagara has some iconic places, or have you ever thought of focusing on a specific architect, i.e. Marcel Breuer or Paul Rudolph, something along that line? Like, where do you see your future going?
This sounds like a job interview now, right? For the National Parks Project, I really want to focus just on Mission 66 era buildings. So as long as they fall within that 10-year period and it was part of the program, then I'm open to photographing them. I think I've got enough to photograph now for a good body of work. 28 is quite a few to get through. I'm roughly halfway, well, not even halfway yet. So once I've done those, then maybe I could look at the wider system with some more modernist stuff. But I'm maybe eager to kind of get into some more human side of weird architecture, like actually bringing people into the scene a bit more. That would be kind of fun for me to kind of explore next, I think.
One thing I've been thinking about all the way through this is that it avoids the supersaturation you find in so many photographers' works. I think it started growing and growing on me, that decision to do this. I was really impressed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi. In the Object Create series, it seemed like none of the subjects were actually looking at the camera.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what was behind that decision.
That was intentional for a couple of reasons. One, honestly, I thought it looked cool rather than them staring directly to camera. But also, I feel like it gives them a kind of sense of contemplation about the object that we're also showing at the same time. And the way we had the images laid out in the exhibition was object, words, person. So even then, they were looking away from their object as you would see it on the wall. So to me, it kind of gave a bit of a sense of them actually thinking about what the object meant to them rather than I thought it'd be corny if they were looking at the object. And I really didn't want them looking at camera. So it was kind of, that's what played into the decision, really. Thank you.
Hi,
Hey.
I really loved your work.
Thank you.
I was wanting to ask a technical question. I was wondering what type of camera lens combination do you use, and like what distance you're at mostly when you're photographing
Yeah,
architecture?
so I use a full frame digital camera with a tilt shift. Well, it's actually just a shift lens, so it allows me to correct perspectives without tilting the camera. I'm always locked down on a pretty sturdy tripod, just to prevent any shake or movement or anything like that. And really, I just kind of take a while to frame the subject. Most of it is actually research before the image making process though, so a lot of Google Maps research. I have an app that tells me where the sun's going to be at any given time. So I make sure that I'm on location at the right kind of time to capture the feeling that I want when I'm there. But yeah, most of them, just that lens combo. I have a 28mm lens, which does most of the work. And then if I'm shooting anything really tight spaces, like on a side street here in a city, I have a 15mm shift, which just widens the field of view a lot more. But they're the two main ones I use.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
I have a follow-up question to that.
Sure.
It's really about the aspect ratio, because it seems you're shooting digital. It seems kind of 4:5-ish. Is there a reason for this format? What was the thinking behind it?
I really like 4:5 as an aspect ratio, and I am kind of scared to shoot large format, both for the cost and the extra kind of weight and everything in my bag. So yeah, that's my kind of like getting close to it in a digital way as I can. But I feel like the subjects are more balanced in that I don't really like 3:2 ratios, so it's usually 4:5 or 4:3 is my kind of chosen one. Get the workout, Jude.
Thanks for showing your work. I like it. New York is mostly famous for me as for the white and red barriers, so the ugly one. You left them in your photos and don't Photoshop it. Why?
The barriers.
Yes.
I kind of like them. I feel like it's like a weird method of control of like shepherding people around the city that I quite enjoy. So to leave them in, I don't know. I'm a bit of a sci-fi nerd, so I think like if I'm picturing that kind of like control thing in my head, like it's nice to add some aspects of that. Actually, I'm just started working on another project of those kind of barriers and restrictions, but within the parks in the city. Because I find them really bizarre, like when you have like a fenced-off tree that you can't go and sit under or something. It's kind of weird to me. So yeah, that's the main reason really. I just kind of like them aesthetically.
I had a question about parks and, is there any funding, do you think? I mean, there's got to be something available or
Yeah.
somebody whose attention that you could maybe get somewhere in the park system that
Yeah,
might at
I'm-
least back you.
I'm hoping to find them. I've reached out to the park system themselves and the Department of the Interior and not had any success yet. So I guess it's just a case of just being annoying, basically, and keep emailing and calling and see if I can get through to somebody. I've sent off the project to a few grants applications as well, so hopefully I'll hear back from one of those at some point. So
Great.
I was just going to say that there are residencies that you can apply to.
yeah, I have done, and then I will be doing for the one that's just coming out. It's just opened this month, right? I think.
I think it depends on the park, but
Oh, so the artist in residency one is just for the park. So my problem with my project is that it's going to be multiple parks across the country. So there isn't an artist in residence for that, which would be great. And that would be the ideal thing. But yeah, I'm going to need to find somebody in administration to be like, hey, can we partner up on this or something? Like, yeah. But in the meantime, I'm just happy to actually just make the work though. If it takes me another 3 or 4 years to self-fund to do it, I'll do it just because I enjoy it. So.
Great. Anyone else? Last question, comment? Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I'm a big fan of your work.
Thanks, Sean.
I think it's quite remarkable. But I think one thing that really stands out to me, even when I see you post on Instagram, is how much all of your images connect to one another. And I never have to see Owen. I just know it's Owen's image, which I think is really important.
Thanks, man. I think I'm doing my job right then. I guess that comes back from working in the studio, right? So I was very much aiming for a kind of uniformity in those images because they were for customers, so they expect a certain level of uniformity in the pictures we're making, and that's carried over to my own work, I guess. So I'm glad that my brand is strung through the images.
Okay, Owen, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.